Welcome to Just Vibes. Let's play PVZ2. The signal. 1. The arrival at Proxima b. The crew of the research vessel Aurora had been in space for nearly 2 years when they arrived at Proxima Centauri b, a planet orbiting the closest star to Earth's solar system. Proxima b was considered one of humanity's best hopes for finding extraterrestrial life. A rocky planet in the habitable zone, with a thin atmosphere and possible water reserves, it had sparked hope and curiosity on Earth. The crew of 5, Captain Lena Mills, Dr. Alan Porter, the xenobiologist, Dr. Kayla Ruiz, the astrophysicist, engineer Samir Patel, and communications officer Myra Huang had been meticulously trained for this mission. They were ready for the harsh conditions, the psychological toll of deep space travel, and the mysteries awaiting them. But nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to encounter. As they descended through the planet's murky atmosphere, thick clouds of swirling purple and red enveloped the Aurora, obscuring their view. The ship's sensors were overwhelmed with strange data, unidentifiable energy spikes, anomalous atmospheric readings, and a constant, low-frequency signal that had begun just as they entered orbit. A signal that seemed almost alive. Could it be a natural phenomenon? Captain Mills asked, glancing at Dr. Ruiz. Ruiz shook her head, her brow furrowed. I've never seen anything like it. It's too rhythmic, too consistent to be natural. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. If it wasn't natural, then what could it be? 2. The first expedition. The Aurora landed on a barren stretch of land covered in jagged black rocks and a thin layer of blue-tinged dust. The air outside was thin but breathable with their suits. Captain Mills, Dr. Porter, and Samir Patel were the first to step outside, leaving Ruiz and Huang to monitor from the ship. Stay in constant contact, Ruiz said over the comms. We still don't know what that signal is. The trio made their way across the rocky terrain toward the source of the signal, guided by their scanners. The signal grew stronger with every step, a steady, pulsing hum that they could feel deep in their bones. It seemed to reverberate through the ground and echo in their skulls. After about half an hour of trudging through the strange landscape, they came upon a clearing. In the center was a massive structure, a perfect black obelisk, smooth and featureless, about 20 meters tall. It stood silently, pulsing with a dim red glow that matched the rhythm of the signal. What the hell is this? Samir murmured. Porter stepped closer, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and excitement. It's like nothing I've ever seen. Could this be proof of alien intelligence? As they approached the obelisk, the signal intensified, growing louder, more insistent. It felt like it was vibrating through their very bones, growing almost painful. 3. The first contact. Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to tremble. A deep rumble echoed from within the obelisk, and lines of light appeared along its surface, forming strange geometric patterns that shifted and changed. The pulsing red glow became a bright, blinding light. Back to the ship, Captain Mills shouted, but before they could move, the obelisk emitted a high-pitched shriek that pierced their helmets and minds. They all dropped to their knees, clutching their heads in agony. A flood of images and sounds poured into their brains' unfamiliar landscapes, twisted shapes in human faces, a language they couldn't understand. And then it stopped. The signal cut out abruptly, and the world was silent again. Breathing heavily, Mills helped the others to their feet. Everyone okay? She asked, though her own voice trembled. They nodded, dazed, but something was different. The air felt thicker, the colors around them duller. A sense of dread settled over them, growing with every second. They decided to return to the Aurora to regroup. 4. The malfunction. Back on the Aurora, Ruiz and Huang were frantic. You cut off communications, Huang said as soon as they were inside. What happened out there? We didn't cut anything, Mills replied. Something happened at the obelisk. We saw. Before she could finish, the lights in the ship flickered and then went out. The low hum of the engines died, replaced by an eerie silence. They were plunged into darkness. Samir, get the power back on, Mills ordered, trying to stay calm. Samir nodded, but before he could move, an echoing clang resonated through the hull. Then another, and another. Something was moving outside. Is it the wind? Myra whispered, her voice trembling. There's no wind, Ruiz replied, her voice flat. 5. Isolation and fear. They huddled together, listening to the metallic scraping and banging coming from outside. And then, as quickly as it started, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. It stretched on, thick and suffocating, until the lights flickered back on. But the relief was short-lived. The moment the power returned, the screens in the cockpit lit up with a stream of unintelligible data. The low-frequency signal was back, louder than ever. And now it carried with it a garbled voice, speaking in an unknown language. "What is it saying?" Myra asked, her eyes wide. I don't know," Rui stammered, her fingers flying over the controls, trying to decipher the transmission. "But it's not random. It's a message." Captain Mills took a deep breath. "From who?" Ruiz looked up, her face pale. "From whatever activated that obelisk." 6. The first loss. Suddenly, there was a scream. It came from the back of the ship. Everyone turned, hearts pounding. "Porter," Mills shouted. "Stay here." She ordered the others, then rushed down the corridor toward the sound, her flashlight beam dancing across the walls. She found Dr. Porter in the cargo hold, standing perfectly still. His back was to her, his posture unnaturally rigid. "Porter," she called out. He didn't respond. She took a step closer, and the beam of her flashlight illuminated his face. His eyes were wide open, staring blankly ahead. His mouth moved as if speaking, but no sound came out. "Porter." She reached out to touch him, but as soon as she did, he convulsed violently. A guttural, inhuman sound erupted from his throat, and he collapsed, lifeless. Mills recoiled, her heart racing. "Dr. Porter is dead," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Something is inside him." 7. The descent into madness. The crew's morale quickly deteriorated after Porter's death. Everyone was on edge, casting paranoid glances at one another. The signal continued to pulse, a relentless hum in the background that seemed to burrow into their minds. Myra started speaking to herself, mumbling in a low voice. When Mills confronted her, she only responded with a vacant stare, her eyes unnaturally wide. That night, Ruiz disappeared. One moment she was at her station, and the next, she was gone. They searched the entire ship, calling her name, but there was no answer. Then they heard a soft whispering echoing through the hallways. Rui's voice, coming from all around them, but warped, distorted. They found her in the airlock, staring out at the obelisk in the distance, her helmet off. She was whispering something under her breath, her eyes glazed over. "It's calling to us," she said when they tried to pull her away. "Don't you hear it? It's beautiful." Before they could stop her, she opened the outer door. The vacuum of space sucked her out in an instant, her body disappearing into the darkness. 8. The final descent. Now only 3 remained: Mills, Myra, and Samir. The signal grew louder, almost deafening. It was no longer a transmission, but a constant, droning noise that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Myra's behavior grew more erratic. She'd start laughing hysterically, then burst into tears. She'd speak in gibberish, then fall silent for hours, staring blankly ahead. Mills tried to keep them together, to keep everyone sane, but it was too late. Samir woke her in the middle of the night. "Myra is gone," he said, his voice shaking. They found her in the engine room, staring into one of the monitors, her eyes wide and unblinking. When they called her name, she turned, and Mills saw that her pupils were completely black. She lunged at them, shrieking with a voice that was not her own. Samir grabbed a wrench and swung it in panic, connecting with her head. She collapsed to the ground, blood pooling around her. But as she lay there, her mouth continued to move, whispering something they could not understand. 9. The obelisk's call. With only Mills and Samir left, the signal changed again. Now it was a clear, rhythmic chanting, the same sound they'd heard in their minds the first time they'd approached the obelisk. And then they both felt it, a pull, a compulsion to return to the structure. "It's trying to draw us back," Mills said, clutching her head. Her thoughts a chaotic mess. "We have to fight it," Samir replied, but his voice was weak, uncertain. Mills turned to him and saw the expression on his face. His eyes were wide, filled with terror, and his nose was bleeding. "Samir, don't listen to it." But he was already gone. He turned and walked out of the ship, heading toward the obelisk as if in a trance. Mills tried to stop him, but he shoved her away with a strength she didn't know he had. She watched him walk into the distance, disappearing into the swirling mist. She waited for hours, but he never returned. 10. The final revelation. Now, only Captain Mills remained. She sealed herself in the cockpit, trying to drown out the relentless signal. It was inside her head, burrowing deeper and deeper, filling her thoughts with alien images and sounds, and then she understood. It wasn't a message, it was a warning. The obelisk was not a beacon of hope or an invitation. It was a quarantine marker, a warning left by an ancient intelligence to keep others away. But by coming here, they had awakened something that had been dormant for eons. Mills could feel it now, creeping into her mind, whispering in a voice that wasn't her own. She realized with dawning horror that whatever this was, it was using them, taking them over, one by one. The last thought she had before she lost herself completely was that the signal wasn't just a warning, it was a law. And now that she had understood that, it was too late. The Aurora would return to Earth, carrying with it a new message, one that would draw others to this cursed place, to awaken the darkness that slept within the stars. And so, Captain Mills smiled, her eyes now pitch black as she turned the ship toward home. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's meet in the next game.